And she refused to have a carpet put down and made a lot of problems over that. I mean, that was an awful wedding.
Personally, I think that everything they do is a desperate attempt to keep relevant and keep themselves in the news.
Hugo Vickers, who revealed the late Queen was so fearful of Harry and Meghan that she wouldn't want to be alone.
Shock details have emerged of Meghan Markle's behaviour while in the royal family. Now,
Gone down the celebrity route, and they have to keep coming up with new ideas, which they seem to be amazingly good at.
But I do see them sort of once again weighing in and seeking publicity, because that's how they stay relevant. There was a time when she was very rude to one of the under gardeners at Windsor when they were at Frogmore Cottage, and the head gardener went to complain to the Queen. I do happen to know that the Queen always used to make sure that she had somebody with her whenever she saw those two.
He wasn't that unhappy until his wife came along and told him he was unhappy. That's my reading of it.
She saw a different side to her, and very disappointingly, she started to have her doubts about her, and I think it ruined her relationship with Harry, which was a very close one.
And I think she didn't like it, that Meghan was dressing up as if she was, very virginal.
She was very disappointed in Prince Harry when he went away. I mean, she actually said to a friend of hers, he did make her very unhappy in the last couple of years of her life, and he caused her a lot of trouble.
Oh, don't forget that she loved Harry.
Yeah.
She loved Harry, and, she would speak to...
And nobody could ever, if we lived for 1,000 years, do what she did. Make a promise, 1947, to serve all her life and keep it faithfully for 75 years. And I don't think interview and things like that, obviously, were very upsetting. And she came up with that rather wonderful remark, recollections may vary, which was, very a polite way of putting it.
Well, I think it's sort of vaginal, isn't it? You're very pure and you haven't had lots of affection.
There's a single line the Queen said to Harry in 2017. Quiet, private, the kind of advice a grandmother gives without raising her voice. He didn't take it. And according to royal historian Hugo Vickers, everything that happened after, the wedding, the rift, the cold morning at Sandringham, traces back to that one moment when Harry decided his grandmother was wrong. Vickers has just released a new book, Queen Elizabeth II, A Personal History. 40 meetings with the late monarch, decades of access, and inside its pages, a portrait of a queen who saw the storm coming long before anyone else did. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives. The advice was simple. The Queen suggested Harry should wait a year. 1 year. That was all she asked. The engagement had only just been announced in November of 2017, and already there was a wedding being planned for the following May. 6 months. Vickers writes that the Queen, a woman who had spent 70 years watching royal marriages succeed or collapse based on timing, on patience, on the slow work of integration, pulled her grandson aside and offered him the wisdom of a lifetime. He went ahead anyway. The wedding took place on May 19th, 2018, St. George's Chapel, a global audience of nearly 2 billion people. Doria Ragland sat alone on the bride's side of the chapel. Thomas Markle, the bride's father, had pulled out days earlier amid a tabloid storm of staged photographs and chest surgery. The Prince of Wales walked Meghan down the aisle. The choirs sang, "Stand by Me." Bishop Michael Curry preached on the redemptive power of love for 14 unbroken minutes while the royal family sat in visibly varied states of composure. And inside that chapel, Vickers describes a queen who was outwardly gracious and inwardly reserved. Someone close to her, quoted in the book, summed up her mood in a single blunt sentence. "You get on with it. It's nothing to do with me." That's not the language of a woman who blessed a union. That's the language of a woman who had said her piece and been overruled. The book also alleges something subtler. The Queen, it claims, did not like the dress. A small detail, perhaps, but in royal circles, small details carry weight. The Givenchy gown by Claire Waite Keller was minimalist by royal standards. Boat neck, no embellishment, a 16-foot veil embroidered with the flora of all 53 Commonwealth nations. Some praised it as modern. Others inside the palace found it austere. The tiara, Queen Mary's diamond bandeau, loaned personally, was one of the most spectacular pieces in the royal vault. There had reportedly been friction over the choice in the weeks leading up to the wedding. Whatever passed between the Queen and the bride during the tiara fitting has never been confirmed. But Vickers's framing makes one thing clear. By the morning of the wedding, the Queen had already adjusted to a future she had quietly tried to delay. Behind closed doors, the conversation had already turned. For the next 18 months, the Sussexes settled into a version of royal life that never quite fit. There were tours. The Australia, Fiji, and New Zealand trip in October of 2018. By all accounts, a triumph. Meghan radiant and pregnant. Crowds in the tens of thousands. There was the Frogmore cottage renovation, the staffing changes, the departures of Samantha Cohen and Sarah Latham within months of each other. There was the launch of Sussex Royal as a brand. There was the September 2019 cover of British Vogue, guest edited by Meghan, titled Forces for Change. And there was, increasingly, a sense among palace insiders that something was straining at the seams. Vickers tracks it carefully. The Queen, he writes, watched all of this. She had warned Harry once. She wouldn't warn him again. That wasn't her way. Her way was to wait, to let the family find its own equilibrium, and to step in only when the situation demanded it. The split of the Cambridge and Sussex households in March of 2019, the new office at Buckingham Palace, the ITV documentary filmed in southern Africa in October, where Harry confirmed the rift with William on camera, and Meghan answered, "Thank you for asking. Not many people have asked if I'm okay." That documentary aired on October 20th, 2019. The Queen, according to multiple accounts referenced in Vickers' reporting, was deeply unsettled by it. Not by the substance, by the venue. Private royal grief, aired on commercial television, was not how she had been raised to handle a family difficulty. In January of 2020, the situation demanded action. The Sussexes released their statement on the evening of January 8th. They wished to step back as senior royals. They wanted to be financially independent. They wanted to split their time between the United Kingdom and North America. A half-in, half-out arrangement. Modern, flexible, unprecedented. The Queen had not been consulted. That detail matters. The statement was issued without the prior knowledge of Buckingham Palace, against the explicit advice of the Queen's most senior aides, who had asked the Sussexes to hold the announcement while a longer conversation was had. The Sussexes went ahead anyway. The parallel to 2017 is impossible to miss, and Vickers does not let it pass unnoted in his account. According to Vickers, what followed was something close to an emergency. 3 of the most powerful men at court, the Queen's private secretary Sir Edward Young, the Prince of Wales's top aide Sir Clive Alderton, and the cabinet secretary Simon Case, went into what the book calls summit mode on the Sandringham estate. They drafted the proposal that would be put to Harry. They worked out the terms. They decided between them what the answer would be before Harry ever walked into the room. The meeting was set for January 13th, 2020. 5 days after the announcement, 5 days of headlines, of speculation, of the world's press camped at Frogmore. 5 days for the institution to close ranks. Sandringham in January is cold. The estate sits low in the Norfolk countryside, all winter light and bare trees. The long drive up to the main house lined with bare oaks. Harry flew in from Canada, where he and Meghan had been staying with Archie at the Millefleur estate on Vancouver Island. He arrived expecting a negotiation. He arrived believing he could explain himself in Carfin Fafthum, that the half-in, half-out idea had merit, that there was a modern path forward, that his grandmother of all people would understand the pressures he was under. According to Vickers, that's not what he walked into. The Queen was there, Charles was there, William was there. Meghan, still in Canada, was patched in by phone for part of the discussion, though the heart of the negotiation took place face-to-face, and the proposal in front of them, drafted by the 3 private secretaries days earlier, left no room for the arrangement Harry had built his January announcement around. Vickers describes the choice as binary, all in or all out. There was no middle option. There was no half step. The compromise was off the table before he ever sat down. What the Queen said in that room, Vickers does not directly quote, but he describes the outcome in language that leaves little to the imagination. He went to Sandringham for the meeting and was told it was either all in or all out. He returned to Canada reluctantly. Out. Reluctantly. That single word reshapes the entire public narrative of Megxit. Across social media, one question kept coming up after the book's release on April 9th. If Harry left reluctantly, if he wanted to stay, even partially, then what really happened in that room? Who held the line? And why? Vickers offers a careful answer. The line was held by the institution. The proposal had already been drafted. The Queen, present in the room, did not override her courtiers. She did not soften the terms. She did not offer Harry a back door. She had warned him once, years earlier, to slow down. He had not listened then. And in January of 2020, faced with the consequences of that decision, she let the institution speak. Some online discussions have suggested the Queen was protecting the monarchy from a constitutional headache, that a senior prince operating commercially while still trading on royal status was a line she would not allow to be crossed. Others have argued she was protecting Harry himself, forcing a clean decision rather than allowing a slow, painful drift. There's been growing chatter about whether the Queen and William were aligned in that room, whether the brothers' rupture, which would deepen over the following years, began at that table on that January afternoon. What Vickers makes clear is that the Queen was not absent. She was not sidelined. She was the head of the family, and the meeting happened on her estate, in her presence, with her authority behind every word that was spoken. The statement issued by Buckingham Palace later that evening, the one in which the Queen referred to my grandson Harry and my family in unusually personal language, was widely read at the time as a gesture of warmth. Vickers' reporting suggests it was something else. It was the Queen putting her name on a decision that had already been made, and whether it's fair or not, one detail keeps surfacing in Vickers' account. The Queen had given Harry her advice years earlier. Wait a year. Slow down. Let the institution adjust to Meghan, and let Meghan adjust to the institution. He had chosen speed. He had chosen instinct. He had chosen to trust his own timing over hers. Sandringham was the moment that choice came due. By the end of that January, the Sussexes' fate was sealed. They lost the use of their HRH styles in practice. They lost public funding. They lost their office at Buckingham Palace. Their representation of the Queen on official tours came to an end. The Sussex royal brand was wound down after the palace ruled the word royal could not be used commercially. And by the spring of that year, they had relocated, and first to Vancouver Island, then to Tyler Perry's compound in Los Angeles, then to the Montecito estate where they now raise Archie, who turns 7 this month, and Lilibet, who is 4. Harry has been required to fund his own protection on UK visits ever since. The book stops short of claiming the Queen wanted any of this. Vickers is careful. He notes that Buckingham Palace has not commented on his account, and that his sourcing on the Sandringham meeting itself is secondhand. But the through line he draws is unmistakable. The Queen had read the situation correctly in 2017. She had offered Harry the one piece of advice that might have changed everything, and when he didn't take it, she watched the consequences unfold with the same quiet discipline she had brought to 70 years of monarchy. There's something else in the book that lingers. Vickers describes the Queen in her final years, contending with declining health and a mounting series of family challenges. The Sussexes were one of those challenges. Andrew was another. The Platinum Jubilee in June of 2022, what should have been the celebration of a lifetime, was, according to Vickers' sources, shadowed by the strain of holding the family together in public while the private fractures kept widening. But the Queen, by every account, never closed the door on Harry. In June of 2022, just months before her death, Harry and Meghan brought Archie and Lilibet to Balmoral so the Queen could meet her great-grandchildren. Lilibet, named for her, was meeting her namesake for the first time. According to those present, the Queen had wanted that visit. She had asked for it. There was tea, there were photographs that were never released, and there was, by every account, a softness in the Queen's presence with the children that those who saw it have never forgotten. The grandmother who had warned Harry in 2017, the monarch who had let the institutions speak in 2020, and the great-grandmother who, at the end, still wanted the children at her table. All three of those women were the same person. What Vickers's book ultimately reveals is not a single explosive quote, but something quieter and more devastating. The Queen had told Harry exactly what she thought in 2017, in the only way she knew how. He hadn't heard her then, and by the time he understood, sitting in a cold Sandringham room in January of 2020, watching the terms of his life narrow to two stark options, it was already too late to ask her to repeat herself. She died on September 8th, 2022. Harry flew to Balmoral alone. He arrived after she had already passed. The advice she had given him in 2017, the silence she had held in 2020, the warmth she had shown the children in 2022. None of it could be revisited, expanded, or explained. It was finished. And what Vickers has now put on the page is the closest the public will ever come to understanding what passed between them. The story doesn't end there. Vickers's book opens up more questions than it closes. What was said in the years between the wedding and the summit? Who else had warned Harry and been ignored? And what did the Queen really feel in those final months at Balmoral, watching the great-grandchildren she had finally been allowed to meet? We'll be unpacking every layer of Hugo Vickers' account in the days ahead, the private conversations, the missed signals, the moments the public never saw, the Queen's own words from 40 meetings spanning 30 years. Stay with Royal Archives. There's far more to this story than what made the headlines.